Alright, today we're having a look at Paper World by Nestor180. Alright, so here we are in Paper World by Nestor180. You may be familiar with that name if you've come from the LBP community. Nestor is a fairly prolific creator and a pretty fun creator. And this is something that I think is going to fit my style fairly well. I'm a really big fan of... Oh, we do have a double jump. This little thing is pretty cute, actually. I'm a pretty big fan of paper aesthetic. I don't know how well it's nailing the paper aesthetic, but it is something that I've always enjoyed. There's a little bit of scribbly there. Now don't forget... No, crumbs! Bugger! That's my fault. That's totally my fault. There's no worries about that. I mean, what? Oh, come on! What is wrong with me? How could I be doing so poorly? There's many answers to that. Level is pretty sparse so far. I like the drawn-on look, and it's something that I've always liked in level design and presentation, something I like seeing in LBP. But the lack of color and the flatness of it does kind of detract a little bit. And there's not really too much to grab the eye. I like those flowers though. I must say I'm liking the flowers. At the very least there is a little bit of gameplay that's keeping us moving along, excuse me. And it's probably not really that difficult. I'm just playing like a stupid. It happens, you know. Sometimes your brain just doesn't want to work. I'm liking the music as well, and something I noticed when I was recording for the title page, that it looks like all of this has been done by Nestor themselves. Oh, is that a checkpoint? I bet it is a checkpoint, but I don't want to check if it's a checkpoint. There wasn't anybody else listed on the full credits page. So that means that the music and the decorations as well, they've all been done by Nestor, which is pretty cool. Like the trees. Fluffy little trees, very Bob Ross. Now one thing I am noticing that with the lack of color, it's a little bit difficult to tell distance on some things. Sometimes it feels like things are a little bit closer than they ought to be, or a little bit farther than they ought to be. Because there's no real depth or contrast to compare. Now, I do realize that there's an aesthetic that's being gone for here. And having kind of a black and white aesthetic does, to an extent, mesh with the paperiness, but might have been a good idea to have included at least some color going on. Some splotches and splashes, perhaps. Now, is that our exit? I'm gonna bet that it is. That camera there, I think, was just me having my finger on something where it shouldn't have been something. Really though? Really though, Risco? Is that how you want to do it? I guess the answer is that yes, that is how we want to do it. That's okay. That's okay. I'm not gonna complain. I'm gonna gambare and get us to the exit, which I'm thinking is the exit. And here we go. Again, it's a little bit hard to tell how far away things are. I like that. That was actually kind of cool. But we're going to talk about it back at the hub, and we'll see you there. See ya! And we're back, and Paper World by Nestor180. And I'd say it's a bit of a softer yellow square, but I do think it is a yellow square. There aren't really any major issues with it. There aren't really a lot of major points of interest with it either, which is kind of part of the problem here. But for what it is and what it does, I found it to be a relatively enjoyable, relatively cute and quick platformer. We saw in the video, that's basically, you know, what you're going to get. It's only maybe about 4 minutes long, and probably 3 minutes if you don't get a lot of really dumb deaths in it like we did. But that does bring up one point I did find with it, and as I mentioned in the video, that having everything be gray, and I know that there's an aesthetic that's being gone for here, that it's all kind of on paper and it's all drawn, but having everything gray like that does make it a little bit difficult to judge depth and height in relation to other objects. So sometimes your jumps don't quite go as far as you're expecting them to go, or sometimes platforms aren't really where you're expecting them to be. So that was a little bit of an issue that I did have with the level. Now, I did like, for the most part, the hand-drawn aesthetic of it. All the little flowers, the clouds, the sun, and the mountains and all of that. I thought that was cute and I thought that was cool, and I did enjoy it. I liked the character as well, and the little extra animation when the character does the double jump, I thought was pretty cute actually, that it actually kind of flips end over end. The music as well, I thought the music fit the level fairly well, carried the action fairly well, was done by Nestor, which was actually pretty tricky. I have a hard time with music myself, so I do appreciate that. But at the end of the day, it is pretty slight. There's not really a lot going on there. I definitely say that it's worth a play. It's not enjoyable, but it's not something probably you'll find yourself going back to again and again. Now, Nestor is a fairly prolific creator in LBP, as we mentioned in the video, and it seems that they're building into being a fairly prolific creator here. There's another level that I took a look at called Alex Star that I really enjoyed and had a good example of something that I've been pointing out in a number of episodes, excuse me, that it has a fixed following camera, that the camera angle is always what has been chosen by the creator, and it keeps things on screen, it keeps things very visible and easy to parse. And I think that that's a really good example of something that I'd like to see a little bit more in the future. Now, we may be seeing more from Alex Star in the future because it does appear to be a work in progress. There's a nice little hub screen where you go from like your base start and then you go to the first level, which is finished, which is the forest, and you can enter that. So I imagine that we'll be seeing more levels building on that theme as we go forward. And I would like to see a little bit more from Paperworld, to be perfectly honest. I would like to see that theme developed a little bit more. One thing that I would say with Paperworld, as we mentioned in the video, just adding a little bit of color, making things a little bit more visually easy to parse, I think would help out an awful lot. One thing that Paperworld does have over Alex Star is that the checkpoints are clearly marked. I think some animation could be done with those checkpoints to make it a little bit more obvious that the checkpoint itself has been triggered, but there is a small noise that does play. Alex Star, there's no actual visual checkpoint indicator, so it never really was sure how much progress I was going to be losing when I died. So that could be introduced to Alex Star, I think, and a little bit of a beefing of the animation on the Paperworld checkpoints I think would help out a lot. Paperworld was fun. Definitely say give it a shot. Maybe just the one shot is probably going to be enough. And keep your eye on Nestor 180 because I do expect more from them in the future. Nestor, thank you so much for taking the time and effort to put this level together and give it to the community. And we look forward to seeing more from you in the future. But I'm pretty sure that just about does it for us here this go about. So from me, Risco, here in Osaka, to all of you out there, wherever you may happen to be, thank you. Arigato, sayonara, see you, and ciao.